Rome. 80 AD, the sun is not the only thing burning above the city. The air itself feels heavy, scorched by the collective breath of 50,000 spectators. But today, the sand of the Colosseum is gone. In its place, a dark, churning mirror reflects the sky. The Emperor Titus, desperate to solidify a dynasty built on civil war, has ordered the impossible. He has commanded the arena to be flooded. This isn't just a theatrical display. It is a triumph of hydraulic engineering utilized for mass slaughter. The wooden floorboards have been removed. The massive drains, usually reserved for washing away the blood of lions and gladiators, are sealed tight. Millions of gallons of water from the aqueducts are diverted into the oval basin. Imagine the sound. Not the clash of swords, but the creaking of timber and the slapping of water against stone. On this artificial lake, full-scale warships float. This is the Naumachia. The prisoners on board, thousands of them, are not actors. They are condemned men, prisoners of war, criminals, the unwanted refuse of the empire. They are dressed as Athenians and Syracusans, forced to reenact a historical naval battle. But the weapons are real. The drowning is real. As the signal is given, the water begins to turn pink. This was not sport. This was a machine of state terror, operating at a scale that defies modern comprehension. What happened next, as the ships collided and men were crushed between hulls in a muddy, bloody soup, was one of history's most buried secrets. A spectacle so expensive, so logistically insane, that it nearly bankrupted the empire in a single afternoon. This isn't pure myth. It comes from records buried in the writings of Cassius Dio and Martial, supported by the very architecture of the Flavian amphitheater itself. We often think of Rome as a place of marble statues and philosophical debates. We forget the industrial scale of its cruelty. This wasn't random violence. It was calculated. It was bureaucratic. It was a system designed to process human beings into political capital. Hit the like button if you ever wondered how a civilization capable of building the Pantheon could also build a factory for death. Because that is exactly what the Colosseum was. It wasn't a stadium. It was a machine. A complex engine of pulleys, trapdoors, and hydraulic systems designed to deliver death with the efficiency of a modern assembly line. Today, we are going to dismantle this machine. We are going to look past the Hollywood gladiator fantasies and stare directly into the abyss of the Roman games. We will uncover the spectacles that went beyond simple combat, the mythological reenactments where the deaths were scripted, the beasts imported from the edges of the known world, and the psychological terror inflicted on the victims long before they stepped onto the sand. To understand the horror, we must first understand the infrastructure. Zoom out from the blood on the water. Look at the building. The Flavian amphitheater was a marvel of crowd control. 50,000 people could enter and exit in minutes. It was an architectural manifestation of Roman order. But that order was built on a foundation of absolute chaos for those on the sand. The air inside the arena didn't just smell of sweat. It smelled of iron, old meat, and distinct chemical fear. This was the macro level of the horror. The empire needed a way to dispose of its enemies while simultaneously placating its citizens. The solution was to turn execution into entertainment. But not just any entertainment, religious entertainment. These games were often dedicated to the gods. The slaughter was a sacrament. The emperor sat in his box, not merely as a ruler, but as the editor of life and death. He was the final quality control manager in a factory where the product was corpses. The crowd wasn't just watching. They were participating in the judgment. This was the genius of the Roman system. It made the people complicit. It wasn't the emperor killing these men. It was Rome. It was the collective will of the people, channeled through the thumb of one man. This wasn't barbarism in their eyes. It was civilization asserting its dominance over nature and chaos. Let us zoom in, past the stone arches, past the roaring crowd, down to the micro level. Let's focus on a single unit of this machine. Let's call him Arturus. He is not a hero. He is not a general like Maximus. He is a nobody, a farmer from the Danube frontier, captured during one of Domitian's campaigns. When the legionaries took him, they didn't see a man. They saw an asset. They saw raw material. Arturus had a wife, a small plot of land, a fear of drowning, and a dream of seeing his grandchildren. All of that was stripped away the moment the chains went on. He was marched hundreds of miles, not to a prison, but to a training school, a asterisk, ludus asterisk. But for someone like Arturus, destined for the asterisk, damnati asterisk, the condemned, there was no training. There was only storage. He was catalogued. His physical dimensions were noted, not for a tailor, but to determine which beast would be the most dramatic match for his weight class. He became a line item in a ledger. The dehumanization was absolute. He wasn't a prisoner of war anymore. He was a prop in a play he didn't know he was auditioning for. The preparation for the games was a ritual of bureaucracy. We have evidence of the immense paperwork involved. Contracts for the supply of animals. Bills of sale for the criminals. The asterisk Lanista asterisk, the manager of the Gladiators, and the asterisk editor asterisk, the sponsor of the games, would negotiate prices. How much is a leopard worth? How much is a man worth? If Arturus dies well, does the price go up? If he dies too quickly, is there a refund? This is the cold reality that movies often miss. The preparation wasn't about honor. It was about economics. Arturus would be washed, not for hygiene, but so he looked good for the crowd. He might be fed a last meal, not out of mercy, but to ensure he had the energy to run, to fight, to prolong the spectacle. He was tagged, sometimes with a lead pendant around his neck or a tattoo, marking him as property of the arena. This was targeted dehumanization. The system needed him to be less than human, so the crowd could watch him die without guilt. It wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was a necessary psychological step to enable the mass consumption of violence. The night before the games was known as the asterisk Santa Libera asterisk the free dinner. It was a public event. The curious public could come and look at the condemned, like diners inspecting lobsters in a tank. Imagine Arturus sitting there, eating the best food he's had in months, while strangers stare at him, placing bets on how long he will last. Some of the condemned broke down and wept. Others wrote letters that would never be delivered. But Arturus sat in silence. This is where the psychological torture began. The machine didn't just want his body. It wanted his terror. The fear was the seasoning. The Empire understood that a defiant man dying is boring. A terrified man, fighting for one more second of breath, is entertainment. This protocol of the asterisk Sena Libera asterisk turned the victims into celebrities of their own demise. It created a narrative. Look at that one. A spectator might say, he looks strong. Bad on the bear. It was the gamification of human suffering, centuries before the concept of reality TV existed. The day arrives. Arturus is moved from the barracks to the Colosseum, but he doesn't enter through the great gates. He goes underneath. He enters the Hypogeum. This is the backstage of hell. The Hypogeum was a 2-story labyrinth of corridors, cells, and machinery hidden beneath the arena floor. It was hot, suffocating, and loud. The sensory overload here was designed to disorient. The roar of the crowd above sounded like thunder, a constant muffled vibration that shook the dust from the ceiling. The smell was a toxic mix of animal dung, rotting meat, unwashed bodies, and smoke from the torches. This was the engine room of the machine. Here, Arturus wasn't a man. He was payload. He was shuffled through narrow corridors, past cages containing creatures he had never seen before, lions from Africa, tigers from the east, bears from the north. The Empire brought the world to Rome solely to destroy it. This wasn't improvised cruelty. It was infrastructure. Archaeologists have uncovered the remains of the elevator systems, huge wooden hoists operated by winches and capstans. It took teams of slaves to turn the cranks, lifting cages weighing thousands of pounds up to the trapdoors. Imagine the mechanics of it. Arturus is pushed into a wooden lift. It's dark. He can hear the breathing of a leopard in the lift next to him. The signal is given. The capstans turn. The ropes tighten. He rises. The darkness gives way to blinding Mediterranean sunlight. The noise changes from a muffled rumble to a deafening roar. He has been birthed by the machine into the arena. This transition from the dark, cramped underbelly to the vast, exposed killing floor was calculated to induce maximum shock. The victim arrives blinking, confused, terrified, exactly as the script requires. But the Hypogeum held darker secrets than just elevators. It was here that the stagehands of death, the bestiary prepared the animals. Sometimes, the beasts wouldn't fight. They were scared too, so the machine had protocols for that. Hot irons, whips, starvation. If a lion wasn't aggressive enough, it was tortured until it was mad with pain before being released. Arturus wasn't just facing a wild animal. He was facing a biological weapon that had been weaponized by human cruelty. The indifference of the workers in the Hypogeum is perhaps the most chilling part. To them, goading a bear into a frenzy was just a Tuesday. It was their job. They were the technicians of the slaughter, oiling the gears of the empire with blood. They didn't hate Arturus. They just needed him to perform his function, which was to die interesting. We often think of gladiatorial combat sword versus sword, but the most brutal spectacles were the damnatio ad bestias and the mythological reenactments. These were the fatal charades. The Romans loved their myths, and the emperors decided to bring them to life with literalist horror. Arturus finds himself not in an open sandpit, but on an elaborate set. The arena has been dressed to look like a forest or a mountain. The machine could deploy scenery in minutes. He's told he is playing the role of Orpheus, the musician who charmed the beasts. He is given a lyre. But the bears released into the arena have not been charmed. They have been starved. The crowd laughs. It is a joke. A sick, ironic pun played out with flesh and bone. The script says Orpheus is torn apart. So, Arturus must be torn apart. The line between theater and execution is erased completely. Historical sources like Martial describe even worse scenarios. The myth of Pasiphae, who mated with a bull. The myth of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun. For the Icarus reenactment, a prisoner would be strapped to a contraption of wings and hoisted high above the arena on a crane. Then, the mechanism would be released. The prisoner would fall, plummeting to the ground to be smashed apart, simulating the fall of the mythical boy. Martial writes, "The bear drank the blood of the false Orpheus. It wasn't enough to kill the enemy. You had to mock him. You had to turn his death into a piece of cultural satire." This was the empire flexing its power to rewrite reality. They could take a story and make it real, using human bodies as the ink. It was the ultimate display of dominance. We own your life, your death, and the story told about it. Consider the psychological impact on the audience. They weren't just watching violence. They were watching a play. This detached them from the moral weight of what they were seeing. It's just the story of Hercules. They could tell themselves, as a man was burned alive to simulate the hero's pyre. The visual style of these executions was paramount. Costumes were expensive. The gore had to be visible. If a man was to be burned, he was often dressed in the tunica molesta, a tunic soaked in pitch and resin. When lit, it burned furiously and brightly, ensuring the cheap seats could see the flames. It was high production value snuff. The visual spectacle superseded the human reality. The aesthetic of the death was more important than the life being taken. The morning was for the beast hunts. The afternoon was for the gladiators. But the noon hour, the asterisk meridiani asterisk, was for the sheer, unadulterated extermination. This was the lunch break. Many spectators left to get food. Those who stayed were treated to the most stripped-down, budget-friendly violence the state could provide. There was no armor here, no weapons, no chance. This was the disposal of the criminals, the Christians, the arsonists. It was naked men and women exposed to wild beasts or forced to kill each other. Seneca, the Roman philosopher, wrote about this with a chilling observation. In the morning, men are thrown to the lions and the bears. At noon, they are thrown to the spectators. He noted that there was no helmet, no shield to repel the blade. It is pure murder. The crowd would shout, "Kill him! Whip him! Burn him! Why does he meet the sword so timidly?" This is where the machine metaphor becomes most literal. The noon executions were the waste management system of Rome. The courts produced guilty verdicts. The arena processed the result. It was efficient. It saved the cost of running prisons. Imagine the scene. The sun is at its peak. The sand is hot. The smell of blood is baking into the air. Vendors are walking through the stands selling snacks, chickpeas, wine, pastries. Down below, a group of prisoners is pushed out. They are not given swords. They are given nothing. One is ordered to kill the other, then is immediately disarmed and killed by the next. It is a conveyor belt of fratricide. The juxtaposition of the mundane eating lunch, chatting with neighbors against the atrocity happening meters away is the true horror. It normalized the unthinkable. It taught the Roman populace that some lives were simply trash to be incinerated. But even in this industrialized slaughter, there were glitches in the machine, moments that defied the protocol. We have accounts of prisoners who refused to play the game. One Germanic prisoner, waiting in the preparation area, choked himself to death with the sponge stick used for cleaning the latrines rather than enter the arena. Another, pretending to nod off on a wagon, thrust his head between the spokes of the wheel, snapping his neck. These were acts of supreme desperation, but also of rebellion. They were robbing the crowd of their show. They were seizing control of their own exit. In a system designed to strip away all agency, suicide was the only weapon left. It was a way to say, "You can kill me, but you cannot make me perform for you." These small, tragic victories were the only sparks of humanity in the darkness. Let's return to Arturus. He is still alive, miraculously, having survived the morning beast hunt. He's pushed out again for the noon spectacle. He is tired. He is bleeding. He's handed a dull blade and told to kill the man across from him, a fellow captive he marched with for weeks. This is the moment the machine relies on, the instinct to survive, the biological imperative that says me over him. But then, the twist. The thing the engineers of the arena didn't account for. Arturus looks at his friend. He looks at the crowd. And he drops the sword. He refuses. This isn't a Hollywood movie moment where he gives a speech. It is a quiet, trembling refusal. He stands there. The other man drops his weapon too. For a heartbeat, the machine jams. The crowd, usually loud, falls into a confused murmur. They paid for blood, and they are being given stillness. The system cannot tolerate this. Silence is dangerous. Silence gives the audience time to think, to see the human being standing there instead of the criminal. The asterisk editor asterisk of the game's panics. He signals the archers or the asterisk, bestiary asterisk. The solution is swift and brutal. Arrows fly or a fresh pack of hyenas is released. Arturus and his friend are cut down where they stand. The crowd roars again, relieved. The awkward moment of humanity is washed away by the familiar comfort of violence. But for that 1 second, the facade cracked. The industrial process was exposed as a choice, not a law of nature. It proved that while the empire could control the body, it couldn't fully algorithmize the human soul. Even in the center of the ultimate death machine, a spark of defiance could exist. This wasn't mercy. It was a malfunction. And like any malfunction in a factory, it was logged, corrected, and measures were taken to prevent recurrence. Future prisoners would be whipped harder, starved longer, broken more thoroughly before being sent out. The machine learns. The bureaucracy adapts. But that moment of refusal hangs in the air of history. It reminds us that the horror wasn't just the killing. It was the compliance. The horror was that 50,000 people watched two men refuse to kill each other, and their reaction was anger that the show had stopped. That is the true darkness of the Roman arena. It wasn't the lions. It was the audience. The show ends. The crowd files out, buzzing with adrenaline, discussing the highlights like sports fans discussing a touchdown. But for the machine, the work is just beginning. Now comes the cleanup. Enter the *Libitinari*, the attendants of Libitina, the goddess of funerals. Dressed as Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, or Mercury, the messenger god, they enter the arena. This was the final layer of theater. Even the janitors were in costume. They checked the bodies. If a man was still twitching, they carried a hot iron to test for life. If he moved, a mallet to the skull finished the job. This wasn't sadism. It was quality assurance. They had to ensure the inventory was fully processed. Then came the hooks. Bodies were dragged out through the Porta Libitinaria*, the gate of death. But where did they go? Rome didn't waste anything. The macroeconomy kicked in again. Animal meat might be fed to other animals or, according to some grim rumors, sold cheaply to the lower classes. The human bodies? Some were dumped in mass pits outside the city, the *Puticuli*, but others had value. Gladiator blood was considered a cure for epilepsy. The warm blood of a slain fighter was a pharmaceutical commodity. Doctors would prescribe it. The machine didn't just consume lives, it recycled them. The fat, the bone, the blood, everything had a price tag. The commodification of Arturus continued even after his heart stopped beating. The sand, the *Harina*, was raked and turned. Fresh sand was brought in to cover the gore. Perfume was sprayed into the air to mask the stench of death before the next day's events. The system reset itself. The clerks filed the paperwork. Arturus, deceased. The accounts were balanced. The emperor went to his palace, secure in the knowledge that the people were entertained and the enemies of the state were gone. The efficiency was terrifying. By the next morning, there would be no trace of the hundreds who died, save for the scratches on the walls of the holding cells and the ledger entries in the imperial archives. It was as if they never existed. Jump to the present day. We are standing in the ruins of the Colosseum. Tourists are taking selfies where Arturus bled to death. But if you look closely, the machine is still visible. Archaeologists have excavated the drains of the Colosseum. What did they find? They found the physical receipts of the slaughter, bones of bears, lions, and leopards. But also the small human things. Fruit seed snacks the audience ate while watching men die. Sewing needles, dice. These artifacts paint a picture of the banality of evil. People were knitting, gambling, and eating peaches while the world burned in front of them. It confirms that this wasn't a solemn religious ritual for everyone. For many, it was just a day out. We tell ourselves that we are different, that this was ancient history, barbarism. But the psychology of the arena hasn't vanished. It has just changed shape. The Colosseum asks us a fundamental question. What is the limit of what we will watch for entertainment? When we scroll through videos of accidents or watch wars unfold in real time on social media, are we so different from the Roman holding his piece of bread, watching the noon terror? The technology has changed, but the human appetite for spectacle and our capacity to distance ourselves from the suffering of others remains the same. The machine is still running. The screens have just gotten smaller. Arturus, Remember his name, even if it is a name we gave him. He represents the millions who were fed to the machine of empire. History is usually written by the victors, by the emperors, and the senators. But the truth is written in the bones found in the drains. Civilization isn't measured by the height of our buildings or the size of our armies. It is measured by how we treat the powerless. Rome failed that test. The question is, are we passing it? If this story unsettled you, if looking into the machinery of the past made you look differently at the present, then hit subscribe. Uncomfortable truths matter. History isn't just a story. It's a warning